Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Keeping It Real on Purpose, and I am your host, Edna White. So glad to be here today, and we're going to be talking to someone I think is amazing and on higher ground. Kevin Hyer is the founder and CEO of the Hyer Calling Foundation, a nonprofit dismantling addiction stigma and helping people reclaim their careers. From the courtroom to the community advocacy, Kevin is changing the narrative. That's what I do. You know that, people. So people in recovery aren't risks. They're resilient. In this episode, we're going to break down the myths, the fears, and the workplace policies that keep recovery in the shadows and how we can bring it to the light. Welcome to Keeping It Real on Purpose, Kevin Hyer. So, tell us about, I'm getting a lot of people who shift in these days. Tell us about the shift that you're doing, attorney to community champion. Tell me about that.
Well, where it all began is I'm a labor and employment attorney. I was practicing in a pretty prominent firm in Philadelphia when I went down the road of addiction myself. Developed a problem with methamphetamine. And it cost me my job. And I spiraled hard for a while and finally hit rock bottom. I took an overdose, actually 10 days on dialysis to finally get into treatment. But when I did, after I recovered, I entered recovery. I wanted to do something with the experience that I had had. I had fallen into addiction in my late 30s. Interesting, I went down this road older, where the judgment is exponentially worse. But you have more to fall back on to recover from it. So I started the Hyer Calling Foundation, and HYER is my last name, and so it's like a higher calling. And often people recover from addiction to believe in a higher power. So I thought it was a key plan. But what I do is I tell my story to break stereotypes, particularly of hard drug addiction, and we help people in recovery go back to work because of my background with labor and employment law. And our foundation has a program that helps highly motivated people in recovery get a second chance in the workplace. We provide services insurance doesn't cover. Niche things like, helping expunge a conviction or getting a driver's license reinstated. That's my journey, was living it myself, seeing the horror of addiction, and it is a horror show, but coming out the other side of it and wanting to give back to the other people who can get the same second chance I got.
I love that. I love it. You said the name of my company is called Second Chance, and that's what I believe too. I believe giving them services like, I've been working in real estate field for so many years. And one piece that I always was missing was people get to a level that they're just, I don't know what to do. And nobody's there to help them. I'm at peace. I'm there to say, hey, and that's what you do with those that have experienced addiction. And that's pretty cool. That's really cool. I must say, the Hyer Calling, pre-show we were talking about God has a sense of humor. And I caught it with the Hyer Calling. I was like, oh.
Well, I don't know if it was God-inspired or coincidental, but I just know I had, after I lived and breathed in that center, front and center of the whole addiction. That's the word I use. It's heartbreaking. It's a hole you can't deny because it's a fatal condition if you don't get help for it. I mean, addiction is progressive and fatal. There is hope, and we make great employees. So the other thing I do, aside from providing services like job placement assistance, transportation to interviews, we'll even pay to get you to work till your first paycheck. If you meet our eligibility requirement. We have a mentoring program. We have networking events. We do reference advocacy, which I even enjoy myself, even though we have a team now. We go back to a
That's a key, right? Isn't that a key, Kevin? Oh, I love that you're saying this. Bring that out. Say that again, because I need the audience to hear what you just said. You have a what?
A team. Yes, we have about 25 people around this, contractors and volunteers. And, we're out there advocating daily for the recovery community. And what I was starting to say, one thing I really enjoy, and I even do it myself sometimes, even though there are other people who can do it, is reference advocacy, where you go back to a former employer or at least a colleague if you can't get through HR. And we navigate it each time effectively and say, look, I get you can't take them back, but would you be willing to give them some kind of a reference on what they did well? Like, what were the strengths this person has? Everyone has some strength. Or what do they at least have the capacity to potentially do well? And they'll work with us. And the best part of where I'm at now with this is my old law firm that I left over my methamphetamine problems is now my biggest collaborator on this work. And they're modeling part of what a recovery-friendly workplace might look like, which is offering some form of a second chance. And second chances come in different forms. So
Absolutely.
they don't work for them. We're collaborators.
Absolutely.
And we tell our story together and sell training together on the legal and business cases for a recovery-friendly workplace. So this stuff can come full circle. There's so much hope out there around recovery. We don't talk about it enough. What do you think?
I'm going to tell you, I like that you're saying hope, but I think I hear you saying help.
There's hope and help, yeah.
Yes, I hear you saying that. There's a movie that I watched years ago, and it's still around, and you remind me of it, and I was looking for it. It's called A Piece of the Action from 1977 with Bill Cosby and Sidney Poitier. And they take these students that no one can do anything with, right? No one can do anything with. And they take them out on the street. And when you were talking, I was like, this sounds like the movie. And so they were giving them these opportunities. Like they would go up, okay, now I want you to get dressed. They got them some clothes and everything, got them dressed to go out. And I want you to have a conversation with somebody. Ask them, where's the bus stop? And they would go, we know what about, no, we want you to go and ask. So they would go and ask, and then they would get points for it. And they were teaching them things, real life. That's what made me think of that movie, A Piece of the Action.
Like that. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I just wrote it down.
Yes, you gotta check it out. You gotta check it out. It's a great movie. It's like I said, it's 1977, but it's a great learning tool. I learn a lot, and I know you probably do too. I utilize movies a lot, to kind of drive it home, those kind of things. But you reminded me of that, like just life experience. You go and talk, they were calling jobs for them. They went on an interview, didn't do well. Then they come on, just give an opportunity. You do that. That's a beautiful thing.
And we're out there advocating. There really are two parts to the Hyer Calling Foundation. There's the traditional 501c3, where we're providing these free individualized services. We help fund that in part through selling training to employers on recovery-friendly workplaces.
Ooh,
so we're out there. We're helping individuals, and that's incredibly fulfilling. And they're so appreciative, Ms. Edna. They, people get their children back when they have employment. It breaks the intergenerational cycle of addiction. And addiction often is an intergenerational cycle of trauma and poverty. When mom and dad have a second chance in the workplace, that stabilizes the life that everyone's living.
It does.
So, this isn't smallpox. You're never going to stamp out the disease of addiction or substance use disorder, but you can go a long way towards making an impact. That's what we're doing. But we're also not just the softer side of it. We're saying to businesses, there is a legal and business case for having a recovery-friendly workplace. This is good business. You are doing a beautiful thing for your community, and that's not for nothing. But there's a strong business case. And for any of your listeners, I'm being sincere. This isn't any spin.
No.
The research is so solid. You have more engagement, lower healthcare costs, less absenteeism, greater loyalty, productivity, lower workers' compensation claims. I mean, I could go on
and on. Right.
But this is like, I feel like the pandemic forced this. Up until the pandemic, addiction was already a crisis.
Right. You're right.
Stress and isolation.
You're right.
Force this to the surface. So now people are going back to work into the office, and I just feel like this has never been more important to talk about.
You said it.
And we've all had someone who's not at least had a family member or friend who drank more than they should have, if not had a problem with drugs. And it's all the same thing at the end of the day.
It is. Yeah. It is. It's really and it's really getting to that background. And I'm gonna tell you that the stories that I have, just reaching people and putting one piece in, like you just did, is like giving them that strength. Hey, I could get a job. And then, I just got a call for one of I helped them 3 years ago, and they kind of found me on Facebook. I just want you to know I still have my job. It's like, it creates such a ripple effect. And your story is powerful, Kevin. And how you made the recovery journey, and you're making a movement against the
recovery
stigma.
is a movement.
So it's great.
It's and I'm happy to believe we're one of the leaders of it. There are many. It's all hands on deck.
Absolutely.
The stigma around addiction. What I always find so curious about it is we've all been touched by addiction, at least indirectly.
Right.
So we're stigmatizing something we all know the pain of. Addiction is not this foreign, unrelatable concept that people don't understand. Like, what's addiction? People know damn well what addiction is. They've seen it in their life. Maybe not personally, or maybe personally. There are many people we don't even know overcame a substance use problem because we don't talk about it too. What I'm also trying to say is, let's talk about this stuff so those who do need help can feel safer asking for it rather than letting it get worse. Right. And that's when the consequences start to pile up. The health issues, employment, legal problems sometimes. I mean,
it's true. All of it's true. Every bit of it. In your experience, where does addiction stigma show up most? Employment, healthcare, or in the community?
I think people are afraid of being too close to it for fear that people will then start to question their own relationship with substances. Or sometimes people feel uncomfortable talking about this because it makes them look at their own substance use.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this conversation that we're having may make someone take a look in the mirror.
Absolutely.
And that's their journey to walk. And I'm not going to say what that look in the mirror should look like, but it makes you ask some tough questions. And also, there are people who've been hurt by individuals.
You got it right.
I met with a potential donor once, a lovely woman, and the fact we had lunch at her husband with a drinking problem, and he did some bad stuff. Now, again, the fact we were having lunch tells you, I think, she's in her own journey towards potentially collaborating with us. But there's a lot of pain out there. That addiction's a horrible thing, and we can't candy coat that. But there is hope. And when you offer someone a second chance in the workplace, it comes from, we all get this. It's seeking money, provides stability. And employers get great employees. There's a whole undertapped, we talk about talent pipelines a lot today. You hear it in the HR circles, leadership. There's a whole talent pool that's underutilized, and it's an entire community. What do you think?
I really think that's the truth, because as you were talking, I was thinking about disabilities, people hire.
And this is a disability.
Disabilities. If they were in jail before they hire, But to honestly say that I go into a job and say I have an addiction, I'm going through my category of things, and I think I had one instance of a person that I literally said I had faith in them, and I was like, okay, you got to work for me. And I helped clean them up and everything, and to this day they're better. But it's not a thing. It's just not a thing. Like we like you said, we'll see somebody and we'll, oh, they smell. I'm serious. Like, even in voluntary, situations, we're volunteering, and we even have that sometimes. Oh, they're really smelly, and not realizing that's starting to build a wall with you and them. And that person can be the greatest person. I'm telling you, I met this lawyer. If I would have been judgmental underneath all of his grunginess and everything, I would have never known he was a lawyer. Until I started talking to him. Hey, how you doing? And he's like, you're talking to me? So, yeah, I'm talking to you. And, I wouldn't have never known. And to hear the wisdom that came out of him, I was like, oh my gosh, what did you used to do? Like, he started telling me, I was like, wow. And I was totally thrown. And my head just takes a second. The things shift and change. and you could be in the same situation.
Well, the other point is, oftentimes, whatever problems one has, she gave the example of smell, and I don't know if that's completely on point to this, but I know with addiction, it's often driven by trauma, intergenerational trauma.
You're right.
Sometimes people develop an addiction because they're out having fun, and quite frankly, that was a little bit of my story. Right. It was an early midlife crisis.
Right.
I found myself newly single as I was about to turn 40.
Right.
I made some mistakes, but we're human and we all make mistakes, and people are entitled to a second chance. But in some of these cases, it's an intergenerational cycle of trauma self-medicated with substances. And that's why I'm passionate. And I hope your listeners can see it, because I mean it very sincerely, is you've got to break the cycle. And that comes, I believe, not only through, but in large part through stable employment. And mom and dad can work. There's going to be less. If mom and dad aren't in jail, there's less to traumatize you. I think that's pretty obvious.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
When mom and dad have the ability to get work that pays a living, they're less likely to turn to crime.
Yeah.
So
you're absolutely
right. Our foundation, our just big thing is helping individuals, but also just as much, because in many respects, this is what helps fund it, because this would be very difficult to support solely on private.
Absolutely.
It would be very difficult too. We're blessed that we have some folks that have stepped up to help us, and I'm very appreciative. But our main focus right now, besides corporate sponsorship, is selling this training and trying to help employers realize you come out better off when you hire people in recovery, or have a workplace where if someone does have a substance use issue, they can come to you, or if they have a loved one who does, and figure out together how to deal with it. And it doesn't mean employers have to offer employment over and over to people that can't stay sober. You're running a business, but there's a lot of stuff you can do that will save you money and have less turnover. And, it's a beautiful form of social responsibility, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what was one of the stories like that stick out to you, that the success stories to you? I know you've been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I can think of one young man, and actually most of our clients have been more professionals with alcohol use disorder, but this was a young man who had a problem with hard drugs. And I remember one day looking him in the eye as he sat in our office, and I said, from God's lips to yours, you're going to go to prison if you don't stop doing some of the things you're doing. Okay. It wasn't if, it was a matter of time. And I'm so proud of him. He's gotten several promotions in a call center, at a fundraiser we did. And this was someone who needed someone to believe in him, someone to look past, the tattoos and some of the grittiness of the streets.
Yeah.
Say, you've got potential. Because he does. He's a very bright guy. But he needed someone to give him a chance, to show him another path out there beyond what he'd been living until the age of 25. And we have some others, I'm trying to respect anonymity as broadly as I can here, but there are people who are professionals who either went through a divorce, maybe they lost a parent, their life became unstable, they turned to substances. Sometimes there's professional licensure issues. That's another issue we help people with, is the whole process of getting a license back as a teacher. There's some neat stories out there. And, people are quiet about it, but if they want to share it, we always encourage it. And there are people on LinkedIn, because I know you and I were referred through LinkedIn. There's some neat stories and neat thought leaders on this out there. So if any of your listeners need inspiration, there are people who tell their stories, of overcoming serious addiction. Like you and I met through Mary Beth O'Connor. She's one of our advisory council members. Amazing woman. If any of your listeners aren't familiar with her, if you go to junkie2judge.com, tell Mary Beth O'Connor.
I had her on my show.
She's great. And a friend and mentor to me. But her story of, overcoming a methamphetamine addiction. You want to become a federal judge. There are stories. Now that story is in particular a little bit unusual, but there are a lot of people who do recover. So that's the other thing I try to talk about in these conversations. You hear and you see the tough cases, the people who are actively in addiction and who visibly look like they have a substance problem. But many people do overcome this stuff, you know, and there is hope out there. So if anyone's listening to this, looking and, you know, knowing they either do drink too much or they have a loved one who does, you know, you can ask for help. There are people out there that, you know, anyone wanted to reach out to me on, through our foundation, might take me a couple of days, but I will get back to them. Okay, there are people out there. There are people out there that want to support you.
Yep. What do people get wrong about hiring someone in recovery?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, the obvious concern is, are they going to relapse? Followed by, even if they're stable in their sobriety, have they been sober long enough to be able to take on the responsibilities of employment? You know, or what are our other colleagues going to think, or our vendors or contractors? Well, it doesn't need to be something discussed around the office. You know, I mean, if someone has a disability, and recovery is a disability, but you wouldn't have HR broadcasting it around. So you don't need. There's so many anxieties employers have that can be taken care of. We talk about that. You know, you can still hold people accountable for performance. You know, you can give them a reasonable accommodation for that disability, like allowing someone to leave work to go to a particular peer support meeting, like AA, NA, but there are many other options out there too. They're not the only ways to get sober.
Gotcha.
But I think that's what they get wrong, is that it's a risk, and I would say no, it's a strength.
I think so too. What role does the policy, because I heard you say that, play in either reinforcing or breaking addiction stigma
like
in society?
Federal or state level?
Okay, all right.
Is that your public policy? Well, you know, one great example is I would love to see a way to accelerate expungements of convictions. Unless that's not part of my story, but I know people who did have problems with justice involvement. You know, you can't just hold over someone's head mistakes they made 25 years ago. Not let them move on. That doesn't promote recovery. You know, stuff like that. And obviously, certain offenses are not going to be eligible for expungement. But I would love to see a movement to get away from criminalizing simple possession. Or if you must criminalize things that happen, give people a chance to expunge those convictions.
Oh, that's good.
You know, that's what I'm saying. So that after a period of time, if they've not had legal problems, allow them to move on. Because that's the single greatest barrier, Edna, that our clients, strike that, clients have with finding a job is that.
Yeah, that's good.
And also some mechanisms, and it's a balance between helping people get professional licenses back, but also protecting the public, you know, from, say, if a nurse isn't really ready to be practicing, or a lawyer. You know, it's complicated stuff. There's no easy answer. Because it is a balance. You have to protect the public, and there has to be accountability. You know, if someone isn't doing what they need to do to get sober, we're not going to place their job. That's putting our name behind it. You know, but when we have folks that we can't work with, it's never no. It's not. And I think that's there's a beautiful distinction. Not yet, or not right now. It's a lot.
Absolutely not right now.
Not right now.
To someone listening who feels stuck or shut out because of their past, what would you say directly to them right now?
That's a terrific question, and I do a lot of work on that. I work sometimes with professionals one-on-one on how to. And I should also share anything I do around this. I donate all the profits back to our foundation. I'm a believer. I'm in this. And if anyone was a professional in that spot, I do one-on-one coaching on that. But I think at a high level is don't give up. But you need a plan, because it's not going to go away. But there are ways. I mean, my former firm that fired me over my substance use disorder is now out in the media telling the story with. You know, we've done press releases, made a promotional video about telling our story together to sell train. Okay. It's a privilege. It's Obermeyer, Redmond, Maxwell, and Hippo is their name. It's a firm in Philadelphia, and I'm so proud to be a collaborator with them. You know, you can go off on it to the new one, but you can come back from this. But talk to folks who've done it, because it takes a long time, and you need a surgeon's hand, but you can do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Kevin Hyer reminds us that recovery isn't weakness. It's a qualification. The Hyer Calling Foundation is rewriting the story for people in recovery and helping employers see what's been true all along. People in recovery are some of the most determined, committed, and valuable people you could ever hire. Visit hiercalling.org to donate, connect, or learn how to become part of the solution. This is what it means to keep it real on purpose. And I am your host, Edna White, and my esteemed guest, Kevin Hyer. We're saying goodbye for now.
So long.